We're painting the best knight ever from Warhammer 40,000, and I'm not making this up. Now the goal of this project is to paint this Imperial Knight as closely as possible to the original Eavy Metal piece.
Hello, I'm Marcel.
And I'm Mrs. Snakeworks. Here is the original Eavy Metal House Dunstan Squire. I think we can all agree this looks bloody fantastic.
So what we have here is some nice blue armour, a lot of metal areas, some gold trim, well I think that's gold, red eyes, and something quite unusual indeed, magenta ribbing. I've never seen that before.
Well, it looks like it's missing an arm. Looks like one of the old Space Marines or whatever it was he used to paint, but like an elderly version. So he's like hunched over.
An old man?
Yeah, with a walking stick. Not using it correctly, and he's missing an arm.
Let's get started, shall we?
So wargamers of a certain age will recognise that what we have here in our hands is a blister pack. All of the old metal miniatures came in these, unless they were huge, then they might come in a clam pack, but we'll look at one of those another day. Amusingly, this one has had two prices back in the day, £3.99 and £1. I've no idea if it went up or down. The back is just yellow and has a load of safety crap on it. To open the blister pack, we're going to use our good old friend Andy the knife. A nice new blade helps to cut easier. Just be careful not to slip and give yourself a gash.
There is nothing worse than seeing a big bloody gash at the start of a session.
Okay, with our blister open and no gashes to attend to, we can move on. Inside the blister are actually 3 knights. We'll be painting the one on the right and we shall save the other 2 for later. Also in the blister are the 25mm slaughter bases and some blister pack foam. I can always remember the foam being black or grey, so this is either really old or faded and manky. With the blister front removed, we can also get a good look at the blister pack art. An early Ultramarine. I assume he's a veteran with the white helmet, but the white bolt gun is new to me. Any ideas what that's about?
I feel it's a bit of a shame to throw that old blister pack away, because it looks really nice, doesn't it? It's almost a slice of history. I think I'd rather a slice of cake. Anyway, I probably will keep it, so if you've got any ideas of what we could do with it, please let us all know in the comments below.
Here we have our little knight squire. Look how tiny he is. I think this is a wonderful sculpt. Very characterful indeed. You can also see some mould lines and flash we need to take care of. Flashing is when you expose body parts that you're not supposed to. We remove mould lines and flash points by using a little file. I have a pack of various different size files for just this purpose. I think you can even use those weird nail files. What are they called? Emery boards. Have a good look around the miniature and spend some time cleaning those things up. They don't look great if you leave them and paint over them.
Modelling files are very cheap and you can purchase them pretty much anywhere. The emery files or boards that you can also get, you can get in places like Superdrug or Boots. Now fun fact, when I was a youngster, I couldn't believe they called a shop Superdrug. I thought it was illegal to use such names because drug to me as a child meant drugs and not actual drugs which involve any sort of drugs. Illegal drugs, recreational drugs. So I thought it was a shop selling those. Couldn't believe it. Anyway, I'm waffling. Another place you can get your files is your wife's makeup drawer. They often have emery boards and things like that. Not that I would condone stealing your wife's files.
Our Squire also has a little bit of a drooping problem on his barrel. As it's metal, this is an easy fix. We just gently pry it back into position. He can now walk off to the waiting area. Basing next, and we need to clip a base off the sprue. We use plastic cutters for this. Annoyingly, these old bases, due to being on sprues, need tidying up at the sprue attachment points. To do this, we use a combination of Andy the knife and some files. Luckily, there's just the one nub to clean up.
Did they ever make 25mm slotter bases that didn't come on the sprue? Individual ones? If they did, I might have to see if I can get hold of some, because I don't like that little nub on the edge. They'll require a little less cleanup and save a bit of time. Let me know if you know, please.
The miniature attaches to the base using the tab underneath his feet. This tab slots into the slit on the slotter base. Sadly, it's not tight enough to just leave it in, so we need to do something to hold it in place. Luckily, we have a plan for such a thing. What we do is create a sort of S shape in the slotter base tab with a pair of pliers. Just grab the middle of the tab and give it a gentle twist. Don't be yanking on it too hard or you might snap it off. Ouch! We then push...
The effort in that. Ouch!
If you think you can do it better...
Ouch!
We then push the miniature into the base. Sometimes if you bend the tab, you need to straighten it a little again. It's pretty easy to do though. Either some fingering action or the pliers will sort it.
Once we manage to get it in and not have it flopping around, we could move on. Also, I have to admit I'm never really sure if we should be using past tense, present tense, or future tense in these videos. It's intense. Which do you prefer? Past tense, we did it, present tense, or we're doing it, or we're going to do it, future tense? It's hard to decide. Let us know what you prefer. Anyway,
Here, you can see us trying to be clever by gluing the knight down using glue inside the tab slot from underneath. I should have just put glue on the feet and the tab and pressed it in normally. Don't do it like this, it's a bad idea. Although I felt clever by spreading the glue into the gap with a homemade spreader made from a bit of cardboard, this just took ages and was a bit messy, so again, don't do this. I just feel you need to see the stupid shit we try to pull sometimes.
do you guys like seeing the mistakes that we make or I make? Or would you rather we cut bits like that out of the video? I do feel it makes it a little bit more legit, a bit more honest. I myself like to leave them in so you get a real version of events.
We just thought we'd let you know that a new 40k scale of the other two knights that came in the blister pack do actually exist too. These ones are made and sold by Battlecastings, and they are an awesome, faithful reimagining of these old knight sculpts. We shall leave a link to their site in the description below if you fancy a look for yourself.
Okay, it's now the time to texture the base.
To texture a base, we need a texture, and the texture we will be using is this big box of grit from around the globe, or mainly my parents' old driveway. There was a lot of sand in it. There's also probably bits of old animal bones and dried up dog shit. They all help to add to the texture variation. The big red things in there are not turds. They are in fact bits of dried up clay from a previous project. 10 internet cookies if you can guess what that was. To glue the texture down, we need to squirt a little PVA glue out onto a palette. You can use anything for that, you know. We like to use an old oval base. Using an old crap brush, we then paint a layer of the PVA glue onto the base. We like to use it neat, as if it's thin, it just runs everywhere. Also, make sure you use a crap brush, as the glue will ruin your nice new decent brushes. How do I know? Well, I've done it many times. Also, try to leave the tiniest gap next to the model's feet so you don't get a load of texture piling over his toes.
Miniatures look awful when the texture comes up around and over the model's feet. If it does happen, you can just get a poking stick, like a cocktail stick or something, and just poke it off before you prime it.
So with the PVA glue applied, we then dunk the knight into the pot of grit and give him a little swash around. Similar to what they used to do with alleged witches back in the medieval days. Nowadays we only dunk biscuits, and no biscuits are witches, apart from maybe chocolate hobnobs. I love them. Well, Marcel does. I think chocolate bourbons are the best. Here's another little trick of the sealing in phase. All we have done is heavily thin some PVA glue with water, and we then very carefully apply this to the base, ensuring it spreads out evenly. The goal of this is to lock in all that grit we applied and give it a stronger bond. That's a theory anyway. Unfortunately, making it so wet has the added side effect of making us wait ages for it to dry. So we like to speed this process along a little by putting the model on a nearby lukewarm radiator. I think a piping hot one might melt it.
Who's Luke?
Oh,
Lukewarm. Also, I would like to know, why is it called piping hot? What have pipes got to do with heat? Is it to do with plumbing? Actually, I bet it's got something to do with baking. Or animals.
After 17 days, the basing, texture and PVA glue combination has finally dried, leaving us with this wonderful Oldhammer style textured base. Sometimes you will find the odd bit of grit where you don't want it, like on the rim of a foot or something. But that's no problem, just take a poking stick and scrape them off. We use cocktail sticks for this. For ease of painting, we like to attach the miniature to a painting handle. In this case, we're using a Citadel painting handle. Mrs. Snakeworks thinks it looks like a butt plug. Also, the top is really tight and sometimes it's hard to get it in. A bit of force can be necessary, but also you have to be careful you don't break the miniature.
Okay, so it would appear there was supposed to be some footage of us priming the knight here, but I think we forgot to film it. The reason for that was probably because either the weather was terrible or it was dark out in the garage. So here's a little recreation of the events as they happened. Is that good enough?
Alrighty then, so we now have our freshly primed miniature. Some people like to call it undercoat, and that's fine. I've actually noticed we've missed a couple of spots, so we need to take care of that first. This is pretty common, so don't worry too much if it happens. To fix it, we're going to use some black paint. In this instance, Vallejo Model Color black in the new pots. And I really hope they haven't changed the formula, as the old black was very good. Does anyone know if they have or not? Using the black, which has been thinned a fair bit as not to clog up the detail, we then paint any areas we missed with the rattle can primer. This doesn't take long, especially if you use a nice soft brush. As the paint is thin, it can take a couple of coats to really cover any missed areas, but when it's finished and all dry, it's time for us to move on.
Is it possible to prime a miniature and get 100% coverage in one go? The amount of times I miss little bits here and there is becoming a bit of a pain in the arse. I often bring them inside and think, I've done a good job, and then have a look underneath and I've forgotten, like the back of a bolter or an armpit or something. But also, recently the weather has been terrible and the sun has been hiding, is that the correct term? The sun hasn't been out and it's been hard to see what you're actually priming. The weather is now improving, sunlight is getting brighter, so I should hopefully do a better job. That's just excuses I'm making. Anyway, let's begin the colouring phase, shall we?
Our first colour up today will be a darkish blue. In this case, Vallejo Model Color Royal Blue. I actually think we started a bit too dark, but we will talk about that later, if we remember that is. Using the Royal Blue, we then paint all the blue areas of the knight. This is basically all the armour panels, like the helmet thing, the chest plate, shins, and the weapon casing. Here are the results of that blue layer. We did have to apply a couple of thin coats as the coverage wasn't the greatest. Also, I forgot to mention half of the weapon tip is also blue. An interesting choice.
Walking stick.
Yes, the walking stick. Half of the walking stick should be blue.
I've also noticed that royal blue has a bit of a purple tint to it, which I think is quite nice. I do feel there need to be more purpley blues on the market. What are they called? Indigo? Is it indigo that's a bit purpley? Or is it Prussian blue? What's the difference between indigo and Prussian blue? We need an art expert up here. Can we have an art expert up here, please? Just noticed there's some sort of slot on the wall that needs cleaning.
Our Our next base coat colour will be Vallejo Model Gunmetal. This is a nice dark metal and already comes pre-thinned, as it's an air paint. It also covers very well indeed. Using the gunmetal, you could use any similar brand dark metal paint. We then paint all of the metal areas. There are a few of these, including the legs, weapon parts and shoulders. Some parts are getting fiddly now, so try your best to be neat. All of the knight's metal bits are now base coated. You can also see the weird little weapon thing the knight has on the other side. It looks a bit like a little assault cannon or something. It's very weird. Weird, but cool.
Now, every time this miniature is shown in a publication like a magazine or on the internet somewhere, you never see the weapon on the other side. But it is there. You know that because you've seen mine. A lot of people, when they see it, assume he's armless and only have the one. And only has the one long one, the lance looking thing. The other one is so stubby, it doesn't even poke out from the side. The people just assume he's armless. Armless. Oh, I'll get my coat.
It's time for another metallic paint now, and this time it's Retributor Armour Gold by Citadel. We like this gold as it's actually gold and it covers well. Using the gold and a fine brush on the end of a steady hand, we paint all of the gold areas of the knight. These are mainly just trim areas and his faceplate. Is it actually a faceplate, or is the pilot in the torso section somewhere? With this applied, the majority of our base colours are actually already done. There's just a couple of detail colours left. Also, I think the gold against that blue looks really nice, and I can see why people like Ultramarines now.
Now, fun fact, back in the day, I did actually collect Ultramarines. But I think literally everyone has in the hobby at some point, right? I bet you have. It seems to be when you first sort of start out, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Interestingly, there's a little magenta on the miniature, so the magenta we shall use is Magenta by Vallejo Model Color. A lot of people call this pink, but it is different. Using the pink, magenta, we paint some piping parts on the armour. Usually, these bits are painted like rubber, so pink or magenta. Rather ones will look different.
That made no sense.
No, it didn't make any sense to me either. There's one on the neck, one on the back, and a couple in the foot joints. Look, you can figure it out later. Here we have the magenta ribbing, all base coated. I also forgot to mention there was some on the back of the knees. There's a lot of things you're forgetting to mention. I've said this like 3 times now.
I've always painted my ribbing either black, a rubbery black colour, or perhaps even metal. I would have never considered magenta or pink, or even any other colour, as it were. It's an interesting choice that I might have to try again at some point in the future.
The first wash will be a thinned Drucky Violet. We thinned it with some Lamian medium, but just eyeballed the ratio. It was probably around 1:1, but I don't think it's that important really. With our purple wash mix, we then apply this liberally to all the blue areas, while trying to be as neat as we can and not get it on any parts that were not blue. Here is the purple wash applied. It's going to leave some tide marks and staining, but that doesn't matter as long as it hits the recesses. Also, we should have probably used this purple wash on the magenta parts, as surely that's going to need the same wash.
There's probably a reason we didn't wash the magenta parts with the wash. I've forgotten what that reason might be, but I reckon we might find out later. So keep your eyes peeled. But also, if we do never find out, please let me know, because I want to know why.
Another fan favourite wash up next, and this time is Nuln oil. I think Nuln was a place in the old world from Warhammer Fantasy. Using the Nuln oil neat out of the pot, we wash both the metal areas like the legs and gun barrel, and also those magenta parts that we felt we should have washed with Drucky Violet.
No one knows that.
Okay. We also wash the gold with Nuln oil. Sounds odd, but it's part of the look we are going for. Here are the results of the Nuln oil wash. That's a really hard word to say. Nuln. You can see the miniature has been darkened down a fair bit, but that will all be sorted in the next phase.
After the base coat and washing stages, the next phase is what I like to call the painting phase. Not the YouTube channel, but the actual phase.
Okay then, so next up we need a red paint, and for a change we won't be using Vermilion Red. This time it's Flat Red by Vallejo. Have any of you guys lived in a red flat? Aren't they usually beige?
Flat red? Red walls in a flat? I'll get my coat again.
Using the flat red, we give the eyes a base coat. We tried our absolute best to be as neat as possible, and also used a brush with a good tip. We also tried to leave a black line around the eye. Who knew models like the look of eyeliner?
Now, I've never worn eyeliner myself, although it was popular on men back in the 80s during the New Wave movement, I think it was called. Or was it New Romantics? Was New Wave just the name of the radio station from Grand Theft Auto? Anyway, I remember people like Phil Oakey from the Human League wearing it. He also had that fantastic haircut. One side was sort of long and the other side was short. Either that or his hairdresser's scissors broke halfway through.
I believe what the old man says, though I know that there's no Lord above.
Speaking of the Human League, were any of you guys fans? Because I know that I am a fan. I was a fan, I am still a fan. It's tense issues again, isn't it?
We tried to be clever with this next part. We took some Vallejo Model Color Flower Essence, orange, to mix it in.
Fluorescent.
That's what it says! Flour, as in like a baking flour. Essence.
The essence of flour.
I was thinking that sounded pretty nice. We took some Vallejo Model Color Fluorescent, orange, to mix in with the red for our highlight.
Using the orange-red mix, we then did our best to paint a broad highlight on the eye. It's pretty hard to do, so you do have to take your time and be as careful as you can. The next highlight is Vallejo Model Color Lemon Yellow. You know, we never can decide which yellow is best. Using this yellow, we then paint a fine line along the bottom of the eye. The neater you can get with this, the better it will look. Again, it's hard to do, so don't expect miracles.
Now, I've recently found, I say recently, I mean in the past 5 years, that wearing magnifying glasses has significantly helped me in my painting, especially with small details. I think the ones I like to use are like 0.35 or something. These ones are actually made by Adidas or Adidas, however you're supposed to pronounce it. No one ever knows. We always called it Adidas, but I think the correct pronunciation is Adidas. All day I dream about sex. That's what it means apparently. That's what we were told as kids. Who told us? Anyway, I haven't got the other magnifying glass things you can get. You know, like the big bulky things with the massive eye lenses on them that make you look like Ray in Ghostbusters. I don't smoke though, so I wouldn't have the fag hanging off my lip. Are they just called magnifying glasses as well?
Next up, we need a white paint, and the white paint we shall be using to paint the white is Vallejo Model Color White. All white? I do apologise for the blurry footage here, but what we did is paint a tiny little white dot at the back corner of the eye to simulate a reflection from a light source to help sell the reflective effect. You can see here what it looks like with that white dot added. I think it looks pretty good. However, can you see where we messed up and painted over the lines when painting the eye?
So all we did was go back in with a little Nuln oil and run it back into that recess between the eye and the mouth plate. Luckily, an easy fix.
And here is a knight with his eyeliner all fixed up. He looks lovely now, doesn't he? I would love to take him on a date. He would get there fast too with those long legs. Okay, so it's a blue mix now. We mixed royal blue with some Andrea blue for our first highlight colour. I have no idea why it's called Andrea blue. I have no idea why any of the words I use are what they are.
Now, I used to go to school with an Andrea, and she used to think rather a lot of herself. A stuck-up bitch, I think is the term we used when we were at school. She wasn't very nice. She didn't like my Guns N' Roses backpack. Me and my friends thought it was cool. She would probably rather we all had Wigfield backpacks or something like that. Who was big in the early 90s? Take that, I suppose.
Using our mix, of which I've forgotten the ratio, we then paint all of the blue armour, but leave some of our previous wash shading in the recesses to act as a sort of panel line. It's pretty easy to do, but you just have to be quite careful as all of these knights' body parts are quite small, so it's easy to slip up and paint the wrong bit. Patience, as they say, is key. Here are the results of that blue layer we just applied. It's already looking a lot tidier, but that blue is just far too dark for what we want, so we better do something about that. To improve things, we will add a bit of the Andrea blue to the mix. Something around 2 parts royal blue to 1 part Andrea blue. How do you pronounce that? Anyway, I really should have written it down. Again, using this mix, we paint the blue parts, but layer it on so we can see just a little of the blue from the previous step showing. We are creating a transition, but hopefully not too stark a transition.
You need to paint the layers and increase the brightness each time. The trick is to make them look close to the previous layer, but far enough up so you are increasing the value. Or is it the hue? I think it is value. The only other way to do it, I suppose, is wet blending. And then you can do it all at once on the miniature. But I myself appear to suck at wet blending. I haven't tried it for a while. Maybe we should give it another go soon. How hard can it be?
Yet another blue mix now, this time mostly Andrea blue, with a touch of the royal blue to keep them harmonised. I'm not sure if that's a proper term or not, but it is now. This time we are beginning to paint the edges of the blue armour, leaving the big main sections the previous colour. It doesn't take too long, as we're not applying much paint here at all. We then move on to our final highlights colour for a bit of punch. Vallejo Model Color Deep Sky Blue. Using the deep sky blue and a small brush, a steady hand and some patience, we then edge highlight all of those blue areas. We like to take our time with this part so we don't have to go back and correct any mistakes. After some patience, we ended up with this. All of the blue parts of the knight are now finished and we can move on.
Another fun fact, when I was a boy, my mum had a friend who was called Patience, an old lady. She was really scary and shouted a lot. She also seemed to have a lot of different pheasants and birds running around on her farm, or property. I think it was a farm that had a lot of barns and outbuildings, but I don't remember seeing any farm vehicles. I don't know. Anyway, there was loads of fowl running around. I always like the peacocks. Everyone likes a peacock, don't they? You know, big tails and with the eye spots on. They look pretty damn good. But she also had something called a guinea fowl, which for some reason scared the living shit out of me, and I have no idea why. Especially when I go back and look at the pictures. I think they look quite nice.
Let's remix it.
Anyway, let's move on to the metals now, shall we? Did I say metals clearly? Sounded like I slurred my speech a bit there.
So let's go back to our gunmetal. Using the gunmetal, we then repaint all of the silver metal areas. Most of the time I have no idea what I am saying.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Using the gunmetal, we then repaint all of the silver metal areas, but leave the wash from earlier in the recesses to act as our shade. For some reason, it's easier to paint up to a shade rather than adding a shade in. Why is this? Oh, I think we do this with makeup. You start like little and then you add in because it's harder to take away. Is it the same thing?
Probably.
Okay. Next up, Model Layer Chrome. We use a Model Layer Chrome as a highlight colour, carefully painting the edges of all those metal areas as neatly as possible. This gives us a nice contrast between the darker shaded area and the night bright silver.
Nice bright silver.
This gives us a nice contrast between the darker shaded area and this nice bright silver. With the chrome applied, our silver metal areas are finished. I think they look rather nice.
Did you just snore?
I've got a runny nose. Can you take that out?
Yeah. A snore or I've got a runny nose?
Both?
Okay. Now, if I was to be honest with you, which I'm now going to be, I always find it a bit of a struggle painting metals. I always find it hard to get the contrast. that I want, but I think this method does work, so we'll go with it.
We return now to Vallejo Model Color Magenta. If you were painting Emperor's Children, I reckon this would be a handy colour. Using the magenta, we repaint all of the magenta areas but leave the wash from the previous steps in the recesses. These areas are very small, so we took our time and did the tidiest job we could. We then added a little Vallejo Model Color White into the magenta for a highlight colour. Not a lot, probably around 4 parts magenta to 1 part white. Using this mix, we then gave the magenta areas a broad highlight. As all these areas are small, we did our best to be neat, but didn't worry too much about how much of the area we actually highlighted. We then added even more white to the mix, probably to around 2 parts magenta to 1 part white. Again, like before, we highlighted the magenta areas with this mix, but this time concentrating on only the corners, upper surfaces and edges. They are very small, so there isn't a lot to do. And as we like to make work for ourselves, yet another magenta and white mix. This time it was almost pure white, but with just a hint of magenta to prevent it from being overly stark. Using this last mix, we then highlighted the very edges and corners of the magenta areas. As it was only the corners and tips, this was over very quickly. And here we have all of those magenta areas painted. Although it seemed like a lot of steps, it was actually very fast as the areas are just so small.
I do feel that next time I would probably remove one of the steps from that process. I do think maybe 3 highlight layers is perhaps a little excessive. How many highlight layers do you guys like to use? What do you think is a normal amount? 2? 1 maybe? I know you're going to say more for character models and centerpieces, but rank and file stuff. Although this is a character model or centerpiece, isn't it? So we should be using a lot. Ignore that.
Sadly, we may have gone over a couple of the lines on the knee pits, so to tidy up we shall be using some Nuln oil. We apply this to those knee pits, which will then seep back into the ribbed crevices, reinforcing the contrast.
Sometimes you do have to go back and fix your mistakes. It's only human. There are a few mistakes in my life that I would like to go back and fix, but I don't have a time machine to do it with yet.
We return now to the Retributor Gold. Using the Retribution Gold. We return now to the Retributor Gold. Using the Retributor, that's a really hard word as well. Using the Retributor Gold, we repaint the gold areas, leaving the Nuln oil wash in the recesses. Some people like to shade gold with browns and the like, as do we usually, but to match the look it would appear black was necessary, or in Marcel's case, necessary. Also, why is pessary so hard to spell? Well, it's not necessary, as Marcel spelt it.
Or pessary.
Did you check this? I did wonder why you said
Well, it
pessary.
hasn't put a red line under pessary.
Well, no, because that is how you spell pessary.
Yeah, but that's completely the wrong word.
Well, that's not spellcheck's fault, is it? Do you want me to read the whole thing again?
No.
Okay, so necessary is spelled Necess. S-S-A-R-Y. Okay, you guys tell us whether we were right. To highlight the gold, we mix in a little model air chrome. We only really paint the very edges of the gold parts, but also try to match the highlights of the original piece.
There was a lot of back and forth, looking at the original picture and then looking at what we were doing.
Next up, it's a little Seraphim Sepia. I think it has something to do with angels. We used the sepia to glaze over the gold, enriching the colour just a little further. We don't wash it on, as that wouldn't be what we wanted. A contrast paint might work better for this, but we also want the effect to be subtle. You can see after that glaze is applied, the gold has a little more life to it. It's a nicer colour.
I think the term is warmed it up a little. We went from a colder gold or cooler gold to a warmer one. But I'm no art or colour expert. I just did what I felt was right.
Okay then, next we have to work on the knight's base. To do that, we first have to remove him from the painting handle and stick him on the blue tack ball. We need easy access to his rim. Okay, probably not what you're expecting, but it's Vallejo Model Color White up next. Using the white, we repaint the knight's base. We tried our best to be careful around the knight's feet as they're finished, and we didn't want to get any stray white paint onto them. As for the reason for this white layer, well, the reason will become clear very soon. With that done, the base is now all white, as Michael Barrymore would have put it.
Whatever happened to Michael Barrymore? He used to be a big deal back in the day. All I seem to remember, there was a guy who drowned in his swimming pool at one of his orgies or something. I remember it being on the news a lot when I was a youngster, but I didn't understand properly what was going on back then. I might go and look it up.
Okay, so we need a green. This is the one we shall be using. Vallejo Model Color Uniform Green. We chose this one as it looks close to the old Goblin green from the 90s. Using the uniform green, we paint the base. Again, trying our best not to get any on the knight's already completed feet. This paint was quite thin and needed 2 or 3 coats to fully cover.
It's nowhere near as bad coverage as the original Goblin green though. That stuff was terrible. It was like tinted water or something.
While painting the base green, we noticed a slight error. The sole of the upturned foot is visible from certain angles and has not been painted. No dear. Before we move on, this has to be corrected. We can't have an unpainted metal part staring us in the face, can we? The rectification colour shall be black. Using the black, we then just paint the sole of the foot. We had to be very careful with this, as everything else was finished and we didn't want to ruin any of our previous work. After a couple of minutes work, the bare metal foot was painted. The black looks a lot better than unfinished metal, we think. Although maybe this should have been gold.
With the crisis averted, we can move on.
Alrighty then, we need a dark green wash, and the one we shall be using is this. Coelia Green Shade by Citadel. What is a Coelia, and how do you pronounce it? Nobody knows. Using a wet brush, we then give the base a wash with the Coeliac Green Shade. The reason we use a wet brush is to water it down a little. Sometimes we'll add more water directly to the base if it's still too thick. As we water down the wash a little, it will take a fair bit of time to dry. So we need to use patience here and let nature take its course.
I thoroughly recommend against using a hairdryer for drying washes, because it does strange things like causing it to dry with a weird finish. Sometimes it goes sort of foggy or cloudy. Even blowing it around causes it to dry wrong. Strange stuff. You just have to be patient, and as that old TV advert used to say, good things come to those who wait. I think it was Guinness. I think it was a Guinness advert, or was it Hamlet Cigars? I can't remember. I think there was a guy swimming with some horses in the ocean, or surfing with horses. I can't remember. It had a good soundtrack. It was a big deal. Another big deal from the 90s. We don't have as many big deals these days, do we? Wonder why that is. My friend Zach always said he'd be a big deal. I don't know if he is yet though. Zach, are you a big deal yet?
After a few weeks, the watered down wash has dried, leaving us some shading in the recesses of that green section. But we can't just leave it there, can we? We need some more contrast. Back to the uniform green now. Using a small dry brush, in this case one of Mrs. Snakeworks' old makeup brushes, we dry brush the base. We had to be very careful we didn't accidentally get any on the finished paintwork of the knight. Next up, it's a dry paint. I've never used one of these before, so wish me luck.
Good luck.
Using that small dry brush again, we dry brush the base with this paint. It's called Hexus Pale Sun, by the way.
Again, say it with me. We had to be careful not to get any on the finished paintwork of the knight.
Okay, so here are the results of that dry brush. I think it's come out rather well, although it doesn't look quite right. We think it's a contrast being too strong. We will have a think why after we have had a rimming session. Okay, back to the uniform green now. Using the uniform green, we begin rimming the knight. A couple of thin coats of the uniform gives a couple of Using the uniform green, we begin rimming the knight. A couple of thin coats of the uniform green gives us a nice, smooth, tidy rim to look at. And here are the results of that rimming session, but sadly something just doesn't sit right. Like we said before, we think it's a contrast, so let's see if we can fiddle it a bit.
We could have just left it there, but we did feel we needed to do as close and as good a job as possible. Or it's just the OCDs or autism kicking in. Mrs. Snakeworks is forever telling me that I have autism, and she's probably right.
Let's go back to the Cecil green shade. Like before, we watered it down a little and put a nice coat on the textured area. Hopefully this will now give us the contrast we wanted. Again, now we have to wait a few months for it to dry. Well, sure feels that long.
Waiting for washes to dry is probably my least favourite part of painting. It's even worse than painting bolters or backpacks. Now, if you fancy talking least interesting parts of the painting process or anything else hobby related, then please feel free to come along and join us on our friendly Discord server, which is not behind a paywall. There's a link to that in the description below, and I'll also put one up here for you too. We look forward to chatting to you there.
Okay, something you might not expect now. We are mixing in a little flat yellow to the uniform green. Not a lot, just a teeny tiny amount. Using this mix, we then rim the knight again. This gives us just a little more contrast and looks a lot better. Well, in my opinion at least.
While we put our big pile of used paints away, I just want to give a massive loving shout out to all our channel members and Patreons. Dan Yallett, Lee Blackley, Donald, Dixie Wrecked, Pine Tree, Mike Ockkinner, Bobzilla, Charles Marlowe, Andrew Marrington, Nick Ellingham, Bryson Bantams, Timbo, Sven V, SDK, FZ, Forge World, and our newest members Craig McCahill and Mike Patterson. Thank you all so much for supporting us. If you want your name and light and read out by me, Mrs. Snakeworks, then you can sign up using any of the links in the description below. We love you all.
We really do. With the rimming session complete, we can now remove the knight from the blue tack and compare our finished result to the original inspiration.
Now what we've done is we've attempted to make an heavy metal style picture side by side with the original heavy metal picture to compare it with. Hopefully we've done a good job. Now speaking of good jobs, if you're enjoying this video then please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. That means you, Henry, and remember Mrs. Snakeworks has said that when we hit 25,000 subscribers we're allowed to order a Reaver Titan. So please hit that subscribe button and we can hit that target ASAP. Or ASP as my old friend Carl would say. If you are enjoying the content on the channel, then please consider joining us on Patreon, the link to which is in the description below or up here somewhere. Or you could even become a channel member, which is apparently all the rage these days. Again, there's a link to that in the description below. Okay, let's have a look at the comparison, shall we?
So here we have the final side-by-side comparison shot. We have our new version of the knight on the left there, and the original we tried our best to imitate on the right. We got the broad strokes pretty close, I think. Our blue armour is probably a little more saturated, and our gold is a bit less yellow, but other than that, we're very happy. The base is still a bit too dark and probably needed a bit more yellow in the rimming mix. But let's see what Mrs. Snakeworks has to say.
Oh, I think it looks pretty good. I actually think Marcel's done a pretty good job.
We did a good job.
Oh, I actually think we did a pretty good job. I think the colours match very well. And our elderly man looks just like that elderly man. Yeah, good job. What else did you want me to say?
We had a wonderful time painting this old 1980s Knight Squire, and like we said before, are very happy with the results.
We feel we would like to paint some more imitation Eavy Metal miniatures in the future, so keep an eye out for those.
If you have any Oldhammer miniatures in particular you fancy us having a go at, then please let us all know.
Just pop your suggestions in the comments below and we will see what we can do.
This knight will now live on our display shelf, awaiting some more Oldhammer friends.
I can't wait to start the next one. If you want to see some more Oldhammer themed videos, then check out the playlist up here somewhere. And as always, thank you very much for watching.